Are you a lover of all things dark and creepy, of graveyards and monsters, haunted houses and spooky legends? Then welcome to Lore. I'm Aaron Mankey. For close to 10 years now, I've been sharing history's darkest stories with millions of listeners around the world. Tune in each week as we explore the folklore, ghost tales, and local legends that delivered the chills you're looking for. Learn more and subscribe today over at lorepodcast.com.
Welcome back, everyone. Another day, another Chinese saying. Laszlo Montgomery with you, as always. If you're looking for a few nice stories behind some of the more popular and not-so-well-known Chinese sayings, you've come to the right place. And for our Chengyu for this time, I'm featuring a saying that was as true back in the Qin dynasty from whence it came as it is today. In fact, a lot of tyrants from world history pretty much owed their success to the story behind this great Chinese saying. This one was sometimes the linchpin on which a few dictators, autocrats, tyrants, and authoritarian government leaders owed their positions of power. China History Podcast listeners all know this one. The story behind these four characters are as famous as the saying itself, 指鹿为马. That's right, 207 BC, the final years of the Qin. And we owe this story to none other than El Gran Historiador himself, Sima Qian. And in the chapter entitled Qin Shi Huang Ben Ji, from this most famous of ancient works of Chinese historiography, the Shi Ji, we get this classic, 指鹿为马. From the Season 6 opener, 指桑麻槐, point to the mulberry tree and scold the locust tree, you surely recall the character 指 means to point at. And a lu, well, that's a deer. 指鹿, point to a deer. Wei, well, this is a character with many uses and definitions, but for our purposes in this episode, it means to act as, or serve as, or to be, or mean. And the final character, ma, well, that's a horse. Point deer as a horse. Not that difficult to figure out, but without already knowing this famous story from 3rd century BC China, you really can't know for sure, and you certainly can't appreciate it as much. Top billing in this tale, of course, is none other than the maybe not eunuch, Zhao Gao, featured not only in the Qin Dynasty series, but also in the Eunuchs of China series, Part 1. Besides the inspiration behind this great Chengyu, Zhao Gao is also remembered as one of the earliest eunuchs, and boy, did he ever give them a bad name. He's one of the more reviled personages from Chinese history. So let's get this show on the road and find out why. No need to rehash the glory years of the Qin dynasty, nor its illustrious founder Ying Zheng, who reigned as the first Qin emperor. Let's go straight to the peculiar ending that's a favorite of so many lovers of Chinese history. Whilst traveling out east in between July and August 210 BC, near the Henan-Shandong border, the emperor died. And that immediately set in motion a concatenation of events that resulted, ultimately, in the fall of the dynasty. After defeating the warring states and founding the Qin dynasty, he only reigned as emperor from 221 to 210 BC, barely 11 years. In a nutshell, with the emperor so suddenly and unexpectedly deceased, and still very far from the capital, Zhao Gao figured, why not take advantage of the situation to make a power grab? At that moment in the summer of 210 BC, the first emperor's entourage, besides Zhao Gao, included Qin Shi Huang's right-hand man and chancellor Li Si, as well as the emperor's 18th and youngest son, Ying Huhai, who was in his late teens. Now, even though he wasn't the crown prince, Zhao Gao came up with a scheme to have the actual crown prince eliminated and then take advantage of the confusion and political chaos following the announcement of the emperor's death to plop Hu Hai on the throne to reign as the second Qin emperor, Qin Ershi. Zhao Gao knew full well that the emperor wanted the crown prince, Fu Su, to take over after he died. But Fu Su was too close to Zhao Gao's gravest political enemy, the Qin emperor's loyal general Meng Tian. If Fu Su ended up becoming emperor, Zhao Gao knew he was finished. On his deathbed, the emperor had written a letter to Fu Su commanding him to immediately return to the capital and to be ready to take over as his successor. The letter, of course, was never delivered, and as the famous story goes, as told by Sima Qian himself, Zhao Gao conspired with Li Si to take the emperor's seal, forge a letter to both Meng Tian and Fu Su, commanding them to commit suicide, which, surprisingly, they did. And this left things wide open for Hu Hai to be named as the next emperor. And according to Sima Qian, as the royal entourage made its way back to the capital, Xianyang, in order to cover up the stench of the emperor's rotting corpse, now this was September, Li Si had a carriage of dried fish placed before and after the emperor's carriage. Then 2 months later, when they got back to Xianyang, present-day Xi'an, the ruse was continued and no one was the wiser. No one knew the emperor had perished. It was a perfectly executed coup d'etat. Then, at the most favorable moment for the conspirators, the emperor's death was finally announced. Hu Hai, now Emperor Qin Ershi, before he rode the Qin dynasty over the edge of a cliff, he got to enjoy trying out all these imperial powers. He may have been the Qin emperor's son, but he was no Qin Shi Huang. And with this inexperienced, malleable, 21-year-old spoiled boy on the throne, Zhao Gao was able to quickly assume political control and manipulate the levers of power. Qin Ershi was happy to just hang in the palace and sample all his deceased father's perks and let Zhao Gao run the empire. Zhao Gao, while the emperor was busy having fun, began to consolidate his control over the levers of government. And any would-be autocrat with 2 or more brain cells, in Zhao Gao's shoes, looking to assume dictatorial powers, knows you got to suppress all dissenters. Anyone who isn't standing with you is against you, and they got to go. And so we get to the part of the story where this Chengyu comes from. Once Zhao Gao felt confident he had everything at the palace under control, he decided one day to bring a deer to a meeting with the emperor and all the top palace officials. He displayed the deer in front of all those assembled and offered it to the emperor as tribute. Except he didn't call it a deer. He said it was a horse. Everyone in attendance on that day knew that wasn't a horse. It was some species of deer, a lu, and it wasn't even a member of the genus Equus. The officials all started mumbling and looking at each other. They didn't know what to make of this. This animal standing before them was a deer. But this snake, Zhao Gao, he was declaring his gift to the emperor to be a horse. Even the emperor at first knew it wasn't a horse. Zhao Gao asked the officials all standing around, pointing at this hoofed mammal, "Is it a deer or a horse?" Well, some quick-witted officials twigged on what was going on here. Zhao Gao was up to something, and if they knew what was good for them, they better hop on that train and call that deer a horse. Furthermore, seeing how some of his officials were concurring with Zhao Gao, the emperor, too, he agreed. That was a horse, indeed. He always went along with whatever Zhao Gao said. But some officials, they remained silent, or flat out denied this animal was a horse. They insisted anyone could see it was a deer. Zhao Gao expected this and had prearranged to have any dissenters summarily executed. He didn't want anyone left standing who exhibited behavior that might one day pose a challenge to him by pointing to facts or the truth. So anything that involves deliberate misrepresentation of the facts and the distortion of reality, this is what Zhi Lu Wei Ma means. Point to a deer and call it a horse. The rest is simple. All those who agree, that's your base. And those who disagree or call you a liar, now you know who's against you. Now, you don't have to go to the extremes Zhao Gao went to and start murdering or incarcerating people. This Chengyu is often used by people to lampoon politicians or companies or charlatans who deliberately deceive by making these grossly false claims. Zhao Gao back in the late 3rd century BC wasn't the last person to wield political power who used this strategy to smoke out his enemies. Other autocrats have also used Zhao Gao's strategy to eliminate their enemies, but in its more benign form, it's a saying you can use to describe anyone who tried to convince you about something by making some utterly false claim. This is a variation to the Hans Christian Andersen folktale about the emperor's new clothes. Everyone complimented the emperor's new clothes. No one had the courage to tell him the truth, that he had no clothes on. The possible repercussions for speaking the truth were too deadly and perilous, and people, being people and all, valued their lives. And just in case you're wondering, later on, after the Zhilu Weima incident, Hu Hai, the hapless second Qin emperor, as soon as he started to have regrets about putting so much faith in Zhao Gao, he ended up being forced to commit suicide. Even Zhao Gao's co-conspirator, Li Si, this giant of legalism and creator of the small seal script, he too had to go one day. Zhao Gao had him chopped in half. When the walls finally started tumbling down and the Qin Empire was racked with revolts and uprisings, Zhao Gao put Fu Su's son on the throne, who we remember as Zi Ying. And once this grandson of the mighty Qin Shi Huang became emperor, well, he went and did the right thing and had Zhao Gao killed. And for good measure, he had Zhao Gao's whole family exterminated. Zhilu Weima. Point to a deer and call it a horse. The secret weapon of any authoritarian regime. It works every time. For a while, anyway. But you don't have to be a dictator to Zhilu Weima. This one is free to use by anyone who takes the truth or facts and purposely misrepresents them to make their point and get you to believe in their false claims. So, there it is. Until the next time, mesdames et messieurs, this is Laszlo Montgomery signing off, as always, from the City of Night, here in the State of Confusion. Do think about coming back next time, won't you? For another amusing and entertaining episode of the Chinese Sayings Podcast.